But so overall, fairly low occurrence at that point in time when we were looking for short-term rentals.
$1,500 a night. $15,000.
Yeah, I'm renting out my house.
Are you? Yeah, I could do it.
Yeah, Julie and I were talking about it, so we wish the convention would come to where we live. We'd leave and rent out our house. So that's just kind of the raw data. And then there were a couple of questions within the survey related to this. And the first one was, have you been disrupted by short-term rentals due to noise, parking, security? Vast majority said no. Granted, based on the prior data, it seems like this is not a particularly widespread occurrence within the market as of yet, at least. So not too surprising here. And then the second question was, what overall impact do you believe that short-term rentals have for the overall community, including homeowners, schools, and businesses? So here you get a little bit more of a mixed response. The majority were neutral, so just the slight majority were neutral. And then of the sort of remaining, approximately 49% or whatever, a little over 20% were positive, and then a little shy of 30% were negative. So, 70% roughly were either neutral or positive on kind of the impact of short-term rentals.
Rachel, is there any data on what short-term rental such as these has on a community? Like, is it? I can think of a positive that people are probably more likely to go out and eat or to spend money than cook in the kitchen. So economics positive, but you can see the negatives as well of the lack of taking care of the property or noise or I don't know. So
Yeah.
Are there studies?
I don't know that there have been really anything too concrete as of yet that I'm aware of. I know there is a service like Air DNA that some in the industry use, but that kind of has more, my understanding of it is it's more sort of metrics for people that are renting on Airbnb or VRBO or those types of sites. So I don't know that there's been a large scale analysis of the impact as of yet. Anecdotally, it's a hot topic. Anecdotally, you hear about it all the time. It's a constant issue in Kansas City, where I live. Lots of cities have severely limited it or attempted to do an outright ban, although I think that's really difficult. I think it might still be a little too premature to really tell what impact it has. I can certainly do a little more digging and see if we can find anything more concrete that might be relevant to incorporate here. But, as of now, it seems to be a fairly low occurrence and of less concern to the community. So it doesn't seem like something that's a particular hot topic, but obviously, that could change if it becomes if that space becomes more active in the market.
Yeah, okay.
Just a quick note on that. So beyond the nuisance aspects of that, I think this question was trying to get at from the board's perspective of, is this taking away those affordable housing options that are, available perhaps for young families with children to rent a duplex or something? Is it more profitable or will it become more profitable for that person to Airbnb that out versus renting it out? So I think from the financial aspect, it was trying to drive at affordable housing. The nuisance things, I think, are what drove the conversation, but so there was kind of two aspects of why it was determined to maybe be negative.
But we also don't have a hotel or anything in Shorewood, and like when I've had family visiting, it's nice, it's actually a service to have a place for people to stay.
Okay, the ninth question, are there barriers or opportunities or interest in AD, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, micro apartments, co-housing, or home sharing? So kind of during our public participation sort of process, approximately 37% of survey respondents supported these types of projects. ADUs and co-housing were mentioned specifically at public meetings. Some of the barriers would be, zoning, which is kind of always with these more sort of non-traditional housing units, the issue becomes, does zoning permit it? What type of, changes would need to be made if zoning doesn't permit it outright? And then potential public opposition, that's something I suppose that's really, kind of the village's, purview, if that's something that, is desirable, and if you wanna have a sort of policy change to allow these types of units, but, obviously with any type of typically zoning change, you always run the issue of public opposition, so that's really the kind of biggest barrier identified.
What are ADUs, is that granny units?
Kind of, yeah.
Like
It's like
an
putting
extra unit on the property?
Like an extra, yeah, like a mother-in-law's suite, or,
Putting an apartment above the garage.
yeah, like we have carriage houses in Kansas City, so there's lots of regulations around, what can be included in that, and is it a separate dwelling unit?
What's the difference between co-housing and home sharing? Are those two separate things? I don't know what
I don't
either,
know, I
I don't
mean-
know, I'm not sure I know what either of those
I
are.
don't know what home sharing is, but co-housing is like an intentional community, like they may
Like a
share.
co-op? Or like,
No,
like
they
a,
may share like cooking and eating facilities. You may have a kitchen in your unit, but there's a communal kitchen. And there's more of a communal ownership aspect to it.
Hmm.
It's pretty cool, actually. I
Yeah.
mean, like,
and what's the definition of a micro apartment? Just
So,
size.
micro apartment it's typically less than 300 square feet. I don't know that there's honestly like it's kind of like workforce housing, it's sort of this nebulous. Generally, what I would see is they tend to be units that are smaller than 300 square feet.
Yeah,
And they're that's definitely something that, nationwide, we're seeing lots of interest in micro apartments. We actually have a couple, of them in Kansas City, which I never thought would happen, but, they've been pretty successful, actually. But,
Indianapolis too.
yeah, I think in urban areas, you're definitely starting to see them more. For a while, you would just see them on the coasts, but, they're definitely gaining traction in urban locations.
Can I ask a question on the ADU barriers as well?
Yeah.
So in communities that already have that
Mm-hmm.
stock, whether it's a carriage house or something, I think it's a lot easier to change zoning and they'll
Sure.
show up. I think the biggest barrier that we would have would be cost, in terms of if it doesn't already exist, for you to build that
Mhm.
unit,
Yeah.
what is the payback on getting that back? So I've gone to plenty of planning conferences where this is the thing that everyone's like, oh, change your zoning code to allow these.
Yeah.
But changing the zoning code actually isn't the biggest, I mean, that's the initial barrier. But once you change the zoning code and people realize it costs, $100,000 to do that, and it's gonna take you X years to pay it back, that's actually the bigger barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So in my conversations here, when I hear people think that as a great addition to,
Mhm.
affordable housing, things like that, I think actually the cost
Sure.
is the barrier that I
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes warn people on, that we can change zoning and that's
well, our
fine.
land cost isn't high enough to warrant it. I mean, if you're in San Diego,
Right, yes. If you were in a
spending
hotter
$200,000
market,
to build
Right.
a 250 square foot mother-in-law
right,
cottage in their backyard, makes sense, cause your land's worth $1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
But here, it's just, I don't, yeah,
because I say that in terms of the opposition that's referenced, I feel like the opposition could happen, but I feel if people realize that this is not gonna, like, not every house is gonna have these all of a
Right.
sudden, the opposition would be a lot less if we realized the cost expectations on those
Okay.
units, so. In the plan commission has discussed this, we've had those conversations, and that's kind of what I temper that with, is that
Okay.
if there was some sort of financial calculation that people would realize these are not gonna pop up overnight without a lot of changes, so.
Sure.
We
Just
don't have
part of the
very big
conversation.
lot sizes either. Our lot sizes are not that big, and are currently our parking.
Yeah, you can't park
You
anywhere.
can't park, so, yeah.
And so those are the bigger
That's
fears
not
that
an
people
issue.
share with me, and I said, well, it's also really expensive, so I wouldn't expect your
Yeah.
neighbor to just pop one of
Yeah.
these up next
Yeah.
week anyways, but.
I mean, if you're using up all your backyard, most people buy a house in Shorewood, they want a backyard.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just don't see a whole lot of potential for that, frankly. I don't, interest or potential.
Right.
I don't-
I do, but I think.
I mean, I wouldn't see a problem with doing it, making it possible, but yeah, it's not gonna be this.
It's
gonna be
overwhelming-
small
Right.
scale,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Right.
small
it's
scale,
gonna-
so
yeah.
that's why I don't see.
So having the ability
I
for
can see
someone
over
to
on
do it
Lake
is
Drive,
not a
if
bad thing.
you're on a huge lot over on Lake Drive or somewhere in Downer or somewhere over there. I
Yeah,
can
somebody in
see-
a small and a modest home that loves their home, it suits their needs perfectly, they have a one-car garage and they wanna build something for their parents, or the parents wanna build something to be close by, I mean, they can put $100,000 into it, only costs them $500 a month to build, you know, at the cost of money.
We have had that mentioned by people.
You know, it's not,
Yeah.
it's
Here, I
not
guess
out of the
like,
question.
4 or
Like,
5
Build
times a
on
year.
top of the garage?
tear the obsolete garage down and
Yeah.
build something, you know, with, that's more functional and,
Mhm.
you know, will allow their family members to be close by. I don't know that that's gonna be a floodgate opening
No,
issue, you know.
no. Yeah,
And the cohabiting, you know, we have a rule that requires that
Yeah.
doesn't allow more than 3 unrelated
Yeah.
parties living in a dwelling unit. So if 3 people wanted to buy a big mansion together, 4 people wanted to be, you know, and cohabit the property, they wouldn't be allowed to under current zoning codes.
Mhm.
So, and they can pool their resources and buy one big house on the lake. If that's what they wanted, they can't
They can't live there.
live there.
well, I mean.
Everyone's a
That's difficult to
cousin.
enforce.
Everyone's a cousin.
I had plenty of UWM students,
Yeah.
they were all cousins. I think you just got bigger than
They're just visiting for the weekend.
Yeah, well, that too.
Here's my girl.
All right, so the 10th question here is what aspects of our supplier market demands might lead towards tear down? So, and then the first thing sort of looked at here is what's the age of the housing stock? So really what sticks out sort of in stark contrast here for Shorewood is just how old the housing stock is, relative to, you know, sort of the metro at large, the nation. You know, you've over 50% built pre-1939. So, and then on the flip side, you have only 3% built since 1990, whereas, you know, that's almost a third of the state's housing stock has been built since 1990. So you really have sort of an older, you know, older housing stock, but, you know, we talk about this all the time when we're doing project-specific studies, you know, age really means nothing if there's no context. So if a property is obviously historic or well-maintained or whatever the case may be, the age per se is not going to obviously be a sole factor. There's no real obvious signs or concentrations of disrepair within Shorewood. So really, as far as tear downs, I think, you know, that's really going to be more targeted to, you know, perhaps a project specific, you know, someone buys an older home, wants to tear it down and build something bigger. I mean, you see that in, you know, most older urban areas. Or potentially you could see where units on maybe an arterial or major corridor could potentially be compiled and combined and targeted towards a larger redevelopment or infill project. But generally speaking, large scale tear downs didn't seem to be a significant
We ain't gonna happen,
yeah.
unless it's the
Look
VFW
at
goes.
Whitefish Bay, why does Whitefish Bay have so many, we don't?
The tear downs that I've been involved with in Whitefish Bay, the one on Wilson Drive, for instance, he bought the house for $169. He sold it for $785,000.
It did sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I sold one home, on Diversity just last year, and it was on 2 lots, legally, 2
Mhm.
lots, so that they raised the house, built 2 homes. And they took a house that was assessed at $230,000, they built two homes, and they weren't gigantic houses, they each sold for over $600. So they,
Whitefish Bay has a lot of little tiny houses, more so than we do too. Like
They do,
especially
yeah.
along like in the western side
West
of
side,
like,
yeah.
there's like those, some of those
the
houses can't be
project
more
on
than
Oakland Avenue, for
850
instance,
square feet.
that was another
some of those.
project that was, an older farm home with a second lot. So rather than,
Which one, the bank?
pardon me,
The bank, you mean?
no, in Whitefish Bay on
Oh,
Oakland,
That's
just
in my
before you
Arbor,
get to
here.
Lake Drive.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
on the
Yep.
left side of, on the west side of the street, on the corner. It was an old farmhouse with a
Mhm.
double lot, and they decided to just raise both houses
I do.
and build 2 $1 million homes, so.
Yeah, I guess.
You know,
the
there's
low density
economics
is lower,
involved in where these are and why they did them.
Yeah,
And a lot of them were just old, functionally obsolete houses in neighborhoods that would warrant $1 million price tag.
yeah,
So-
The Lake Bluff houses would probably be the only that pops in my mind with the deep lots right across from the school.
Yeah, and those
Those
are
other-
anomalies in and of
Yeah.
themselves. You know, they got the biggest lots in the village and across
Yeah,
from a
they're
park like school campus, you
Mhm.
know? They don't really need a big yard,
Mm-hmm.
but that's,
or Sheffield, and, what's the one past Sheffield Wood?
I'm lucky because I have a double lot. I have one of
Yes, you
those.
do.
Oh, you're a
Very good,
candidate for
John.
tear down.
I have one of the-
Former
the
Sharon
only-
Cross.
but
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't build on the other half. I don't wanna build on the other half.
All right, should we move to are we,
We're
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Okay, what to?
So we've covered the 10 questions, and we can go through recommendations pretty quickly, because I believe we've kind of gone through these on prior presentations, but then, to kind of recap, there were sort of 4 categories of recommendations that we were asked to sort of look at in the context of this study. So the first one is, what types of housing will not be met? So affordability gaps that exist now will likely worsen, as we kind of talked about throughout, looking at some of the previous data. There's no reason to expect that demand won't continue to rise. Shorewood's walkability, proximity to Milwaukee and employment centers, and good schools all contribute to making it a desirable place to live. Also, interest rates aren't expected to rise significantly for at least a couple of years, which should continue to sort of drive demand for the owner-occupied market. Housing costs are likely to continue to rise, unlikely that there would be significant and